Hello, welcome once again the Daily Fantasy Cafe podcast, our cafe on air. I'm your host, Big Italy 42. This podcast is going to focus on FanDuel for tonight's huge 13-game slate. They've got some really nice big action over here, including the Wednesday $1 million Mega Slam, $25 entry, $100,000 to first place, $1 million prize pool. Filling fast, so get your entries in as soon as possible for this one. Try to take down some big-time money. You've got your normal other ones here, other tournaments here. You've got the NBA shot, the $2, $150 prize pool. The swap is a $1 entry, $75,000 prize pool. And the layup is a $5 buy-in, $50,000 prize pool. So without further ado, we go ahead and get things started here. Go a little bit different on this podcast with the structure. I'm going to go position by position rather than game by game to kind of give you an idea of where you should be targeting each player. So I'm going to kick things off here, obviously at the top with point guard. Your top option on the slate is Russell Westbrook. No question there. Got his face dented last week. Missed one game, expected to be back tonight. And not a better time to be back than against Philadelphia, who he should have his way with. $12,000 though, a very expensive price tag. However, if he goes for one of his patented 70, 80 point games like he has his last two, 74.3, 68.1 fantasy points. If you don't have him in the Mega Slam or a big tournament, you're going to be sitting behind some people pretty quickly. So definitely get yourself some exposure if you have multiple lineups. If you don't, fade him at your own risk. Next up, you've got Chris Paul, 10,300. We've seen what he's done without Blake Griffin on the court. Absolutely tremendous. He's basically a lock for 40 fantasy points with 50 plus upside. So he's another elite option if you can't afford Russell Westbrook. Steph Curry, more of just a GPP option for me at 10,200. 14-point spread in that one against Milwaukee. So we've seen this many times. Steph Curry doesn't play huge minutes if it's a blowout. So that's a single entry, maybe a couple entries if you've got a bunch of lineups there. Damian Lillard, a decent play against the Clippers and Chris Paul. But at 8,700, he's not a guy I'll be investing heavily in. If I'm going to pay for someone around that price, it's Ricky Rubio, 8,300. Been absolutely tremendous, averaging 40 minutes per game over his last three. And 40, 40, and 48.9 fantasy points. So a little bit prohibitive of a price tag there, 8,300. But as you see last game, coming off triple-double, has 50-point fantasy upside. So definitely a guy to target there. Next up, guys like Kyrie Irving, Tyreek Evans. I'm not going to be investing much in these guys, especially with Anthony Davis questionable. After going around shoot-around, he might play tonight. So Tyreek Evans out for me at 8,300. Next person I'm looking at as you move a little bit further down, Isaiah Thomas. Once again, just a GPP kind of play for me, though. He's at 6,900, a little bit expensive. Utah, a tough matchup. They've been playing great defense right now, but he's a guy, when he gets hot, can score in bunches. DJ Augustine, obviously not in play with Westbrook being back. Moving down a little bit further, George Hill, 6,300, I think is a fine play against the terrible Knicks defense. Langston Galloway and company, not much of resistance there at the point guard position or any other position, really. George Hill playing very well recently. Looking at his recent game logs, 3 straight of 32 plus, including a triple-double. 49 fantasy points against Cleveland 2 games ago. So he's a nice target. Darren Williams, same price against Charlotte. We know doesn't matter who's playing point guard there. None of them play much defense. So he's a great target. And Mo Williams, despite huge performances, once again last night, the night before, or the game before, 3 straight at least 39 fantasy points here on FanDuel. And he's at 6,200. Dropped down $400 since last night. So an elite value option there that could crush his salary. Reggie Jackson, 6,100 in play against New Orleans. And if you're looking down a little bit deeper, the only other guy I'm really targeting lower than that, you're looking at Jeremy Lin playing great basketball, 5,200. Still coming off the bench, though, so there is some concern there. Some risk you're taking, but I think he's certainly in play. If you're going down even deeper, maybe a single bullet, you could look at Ish Smith, also coming off the bench, but playing very well recently. He's got 21.3 and 36.5 his last two. Don't expect huge things. Don't expect another 36 fantasy point performance, but he could easily pay off his price tag for you. Grievous Vasquez, a cheap option with Kyle Lowry expected to sit out again. He's at 4,200. Ray McCallum, same price. Not much upside with him, though, splitting time with Andre Miller, but a solid floor, so you should see a decent amount of minutes. And that's about it for me. I'm not reaching too deep here on this big 13-game slate. Next up, we have shooting guard, who, once again, James Harden now back from his suspension. He's the top option. Seemingly a tough matchup against Memphis, but they have struggled with shooting guards all year. You know, he plays more of a point shooting guard, so he controls the offense quite a bit. But $11,000, expensive price tag, but outside of Russell Westbrook, no one with the ceiling that James Harden provides. So certainly in play there, coming off a day of rest. Eric Bledsoe at $9,000, just too much for me tonight. It's a fine matchup, but he's going to need 45 fantasy points to even come towards his value there. So no thanks for me there outside of maybe a single bullet. DeMar DeRozan, great option tonight, especially if Kyle Lowry sits, which he is expected to do. Finally got off of the week struggles there with on shooting the ball. 55.3 fantasy points last game. Not expecting that type of performance necessarily, but not a tough matchup there against the Cavs wing players. So definitely in play at 7,200. Victor Oladipo, nice cash game play at 6,900 against Phoenix. Going down a little bit further, Greek Freak, 6,400. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 38.2 fantasy points last night. He's a guy that can fill it up in a bunch of different ways, so he's a target as well. Moving down a little bit deeper, there's not a whole lot to like down here. Saw Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was playing well for a while, coming off of a pretty bad performance against Washington, so he could go under on in tournaments, but at 5,300, not investing too much in him. Rodney Stuckey, also at 5,300. He's a guy with a very low floor but a high ceiling. He's had some pretty nice games recently. You're looking at least 29 in 4 of his last 5, including 2 over 40. So big upside there, but definitely risky. Lou Williams playing great off the bench, but 5,300 for a bench player, kind of expensive as well. So definitely not putting him in my cash games. As you're looking down further, Jamal Crawford, questionable for tonight's game after leaving last game with an injury. So if that's the case, JJ Redick at 4,600 makes for one of the best plays at the position. Not a ton of upside there, but he's playing big minutes, and he should have a safe floor right around 20 to 25 fantasy points. So definitely a target there. Guys like Dion Waiters, Ben McLemore, no thanks for me. Henry Walker, Bill Walker, whatever you'd like to call him, was playing well, but when I saw 12 minutes last game, combined 18 fantasy points over his last 2, so that's a pass for me. Seemingly some inconsistencies there. If you want to go really cheap, there's not a whole lot of options here. I was looking for some values. Looks like Kevin Martin will be good to go tonight for Minnesota, so that takes Gary Neal out of the picture. Courtney Lee had himself a nice game last night, but too inconsistent for my taste, so that'll do it for shooting guard here. Moving on to small forward. Your obvious top option of the night with Kevin Durant still out is going to be LeBron James, but at 11,100 against Toronto, some other options there for Cleveland. Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving both back. Love may not be 100%. I guess he got an IV after the last game, so I'm not going to pay too much for LeBron James. If I'm paying $11,000, I would much rather just go ahead and pay for a Chris Paul, a Russell Westbrook at $900 more, or James Harden at right about the same price. Draymond Green's a fine play, but at $7,800, it's going to take him quite a bit to pay off his price tag, so I'm going to pass outside of tournaments. Gordon Hayward, guy with significant upside. We saw it last night, $7,700. Boston just got slaughtered last night defensively, so he's a guy to be looking at. I'm not targeting Rudy Gay much against Kawhi Leonard, who locked him down last game. It's just 6 of 15 from the field, and that was without DeMarcus Cousins, who will be back for tonight's game. We'll get into that in a minute. Andrew Wiggins certainly in play at 6,700 against Denver, who are just a mess all the way around. He's playing huge minutes, 41 or more in 3 of his last 5, so he's a safe cash game play. Chris Middleton playing great basketball at 6,500, a guy you can look at. 43.4 fantasy points last night. Now he gets Golden State in an up-tempo game where he could excel, so I like Chris Middleton quite a bit. Looking down a little bit, Mike Kidd-Gilchrist, a fine cash game play. Not a whole lot of upside at his price at $6K, though. PJ Tucker's playing well. I'm not overreacting to last game's stat line, 20 and 14. Saw some extended run with Markieff Morris ejected, so we'll see what happens there. Andre Iguodala was a great value play for quite a while. He's seeing about 30 minutes per game, but at 5K, he's getting a little too expensive for me. And right there, you're looking at a 20 to 25 point floor, and that's pretty close to his ceiling as well. So that's going to be a pass for me now at that price. Jay Crowder coming off a terrible performance, as are the rest of the Celtics. He could be in play at 4,800, but not a cash game play for me either. Matt Barnes also questionable in this one. I'm not looking at Jordan Hamilton, despite his cheap price tag. Didn't do much in 26 minutes last game, so he's a pass for me as well. Corey Brewer was a big disappointment as a value play last night, so 4,200, I guess he's in play in a tournament, but not investing much in him either on this huge slate. Looking down even deeper, there are no options I want down near the bottom. I'm not reaching, like I said, some other positions. No reason to reach down for some guys you're not comfortable with on a 13-game slate. You got 26 teams in action. I will not be forcing bad value plays into my lineups tonight. Anthony Davis at 10,600 could be a great tournament play, assuming he goes tonight. Detroit has struggled mightily with bigs at times this season, and obviously we know Anthony Davis with enormous upside. Struggled his last few games. Remains to be seen if he's 100%, but I don't anticipate they'll be rushing him back if he's not healthy, so he's a target. LaMarcus Aldridge in a great spot, but also very expensive, 9,800. Not a guy I'll be having much of tonight. Serge Ibaka, same situation, great spot, but 8,200 is very expensive in a 15-point spread. I like to think Russell Westbrook will get most of the fantasy goodness out of that one before it gets out of hand. Derek Favors had a nice game last night, coming off a nice game the time before that. So you're looking at his consistency. I mean, he's pretty much over 30 points every single game. 9 of his last 10 over 30. So he's a solid cash game play tonight at 7,600. Not a ton of upside, but Boston's really struggled with some big men. So I like Derek Favors quite a bit. Tim Duncan in a tournament. Obviously Spurs, very unpredictable. I'm not investing too much there. Nerlens Noel, significant upside as we know. 6,900, his price really getting up there, but he's a guy that's got a safe floor due to the fact that he contributes in a lot of different categories. Looking down further, Thad Young at 6,000 looks like an okay GPP play, but he is coming off the bench, not a ton of minutes, so mostly a pass there. Carlos Boozer producing at a decent level, 15 and 11 last night, but only 25 minutes there still. I won't be paying his $5,300 price tag tonight. Brandon Bass, assuming that Kelly Olynyk can't go again, should see a decent amount of minutes at 5,400. I don't love him, but I think he's a decent play there. Tough matchup, though, against Utah, who's playing well defensively and is a great rebounding team. If you're looking for a guy in a tournament, Tristan Thompson at 5,300, assuming that Kevin Love isn't 100%, could see some run tonight against Patrick Patterson, Amir Johnson and company, so I don't mind him. Donatas Motiejunas, 5,200, is a guy coming off a great game last night. 14 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. Obviously isn't going to be repeating those assist numbers. In fact, he had no more than 2 in each of his last 9 games. So a lot of that due to the fact that James Harden sat out. But I think he's a decent play tonight, especially if Zach Randolph, who is questionable, is also unable to go. Looking down a little bit deeper, I've said it before, I don't like targeting Patrick Patterson or Amir Johnson, but both under 5K, Patterson 4,800, Johnson at 46. I think Patterson the better play of the two if you like to go that route, but not for me tonight. Andrea Bargnani came back to earth. He is who we thought he was. He's the draft bust, so until we see some actual consistency out of him, no thanks at 4,600. Looking down even deeper, Ersan Ilyasova had himself a nice game last night. 21 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, and a steal. 30.6 fantasy points in 30 minutes, so 29 or more minutes, 3 straight games for him. So Golden State, especially when David Lee's at the 4, struggle a little bit with power forwards, so don't expect huge things, but a great price tag for a guy with a little bit of upside there. Looking deeper, not a whole lot I want to be interested in. If you want to go real crazy, you could go with Mitch McGary, but his inconsistencies are too much for me. Alternating great games and terrible games at his price tag at 4K, so that's a pass. Thomas Robinson playing well off the bench, but not getting a lot of minutes. 19 or more fantasy points, 3 straight games, but 13, 25, and 15 minutes. Going to go ahead and scare me off of him. Jeremy Grant's a guy that a lot of people have been looking at, and I think he's a fine tournament play, especially if Robert Covington can't go, but hasn't shown a whole lot of upside recently, so Another one of those situations where I'm not going to force him into my lineup on a big slate. Looking down deeper, nobody I'm reaching for once again at this position, down low. Now we move over to center. Your obvious top option on the night is DeMarcus Cousins, 10,900. Spurs struggle against big men. Not a lot of elite defenders down there for San Antonio. He missed the last game last week against them, and Kings kept it close. So I see a big point spread here, double-digit point spread. Doesn't concern me with DeMarcus Cousins, especially now that he's back from injury. Looked great last night against the Knicks. I think he's in play in tournaments, possibly even some cash games. But I think in cash games, I'd rather go $800 or $1,200 less to DeAndre Jordan, who over his last 9 games averaging 16 points and 20 rebounds per game. He has a ridiculously high floor, also a very high price tag, but you look at his logs, he's a very safe play. You obviously hope that he gets you 50 plus, but if he gets you about 40, I mean, he's going to pay off his tag. And if you don't have him in some tournaments and he goes for a patented 2020 game, then you could be behind the 8 ball quickly at center position where you can only roster 1 here on FanDuel. You're looking at Andre Drummond's got some upside at 8,400, but I'll pass. I would rather go with Al Jefferson against Brooklyn or Hassan Whiteside against the Lakers. Those guys at 8,200 and 8,100 respectively. Marc Gasol's price tag still down, 7,600. Going against Houston, obviously without Dwight Howard. No big men down there. If Zach Randolph can't go, that's going to bump up Marc Gasol for me even more. Brook Lopez has got to look at some tournaments, but no thanks for me in cash games. Nikola Pekovic says he's good to go, but at 6,600 tonight, coming off of a game he missed with a bad ankle, I'm going to pass there. Steven Adams, they said, is questionable, could make his return tonight, so that makes Enes Kanter a pass for me as well. Jonas Valanciunas and Roy Hibbert, just under 6K, interesting for tournaments, but I don't see the need to take a risk with one of these two guys on a 13-game slate. Cheap guy I'll be targeting is Alex Len, 5,200. Orlando struggled with bigs all season long. Nikola Vucevic, known much more as a scorer and a rebounder than a defender, so I think he's in a good spot tonight. If you're looking down deeper than that, a lot of uncertainty, so I don't really see the need to reach for one of these guys. And that's going to about wrap it up here with the positional breakdowns. Obviously, monitor injury news moving up towards tip-off, which is at 7 o'clock tonight. Make sure guys like Anthony Davis, things like that, notice the fallouts from guys sitting, guys playing, who benefits. Definitely keep an eye on that on Twitter. And I will be back again with you here tomorrow afternoon with a breakdown of tomorrow's small 2-game slate. So thanks for hanging out with us. And check out some great content we have at dailyfantasycafe.com. And we'll see you next time.